name is David Calvo, and I'm the Director of Family and Community Engagement at CABE, the California Association of Bilingual Education. And today, we're at the CABE conference, and I am so fortunate to have run into Enid Lee, one of our featured speakers. I want to learn about what your presentation is all about. Could you share with us, please?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that, and I'm glad we ran into each other yesterday. I started today to talk about the connections I've had with CABE for the last 25 years.
Wow.
1997, yeah, 1997, CABE made a policy statement about the role of Ebonics in the education of African American students. And it was that year that I connected with CABE. I just moved to California and was working with the Center for Language Minority Education and Research here in Long Beach at Cal State Long Beach. And I was invited to CABE that year, and that was the year that they made the statement saying that CABE considered African American language as a genuine form of human communication, and that it was not in any way a lower standard of or piece of something else. And when I saw that, I thought that is an organization I can line up with, because that speaks to the issue of things of African origin being belittled, destroyed, and so forth. And CABE was taking a position supporting the Oakland School District at the time, where there was a lot of conversation back and forth as to whether this was a real language, whether it was good language, whether it was broken English, whether it was hinder the learning among African American students. And CABE gave, I would say, a principled statement about its validity, and have continued over the last 25 years to bring people to the conference who could speak with authority on the composition of that language, people like Dr. Cherokee Hawley and so forth, and what needed to be done in terms of preparation of teachers so that students could bring those students who spoke African American language. In some places it's called the African American vernacular. Personally, I prefer African American language because it makes clear that it is a language with its rules that are governed as other languages are, and that it comes out of the contact, or that's a nice word for really the oppression that languages of people, African people, have faced. Today I started by talking about the way in which West African languages were specifically destroyed on that horrific journey over here as kidnapped Africans, to make sure that on the ship there wasn't plotting and planning of things they could do. So languages got diminished, destroyed, denied. And so when people arrived here, they had to figure out a way of communicating with those who were with them, and also with the people who were colonizing and enslaving them. So there's a rich history of that, and it made me connect with CABE, because I have spent time trying to make sure that things that of African origin are lifted up and embedded in a respectful way in the lives of African American students, as a way to make sure that they can learn all the things they need to learn, because they are bringing much. So that was kind of what I talked about in the first part of my presentation. And one of the things that was very heartening, a woman came up to me afterwards and said, two people actually said, you know, I never knew that CABE took a position on that. And because a lot of people in the room are just a little bit over 25 years. So when I asked how many of you were here in 1997 at CABE, some hands went up, but not a lot. So one woman who was young and said she's doing activist work around African American students. She is glad to know that, because she didn't know. Another woman said an aunt of hers was very troubled by the position that Oakland took, because, you know, things of African heritage, ancestry have always been pushed into the ground in this country. And whenever we have an opportunity to lift them up, to show their value, that's important. But she said that she thinks that over the years her aunt has changed her mind. So I felt that I was talking about something relevant. Yeah, yes. I didn't know how it would go over, because, you know, 1997 is a long time from today.
Sure.
But that's what happens when people come to to conferences on a regular basis for a quarter of a century, and they keep working on things that matter to them.
Absolutely. You know, you shared about these issues that were being perceived negatively
Yes.
in the late 90s.
Yeah.
And we've had so much growth
Yes.
since.
Yeah.
Could you share with us a little bit about that journey, how it evolved, and,
Yeah.
and perhaps what are things that we still have to focus on?
Yes, we have a lot to focus on, because even though we have come, some people have come to understand, for instance, that African American language is not something to be corrected, it's to be translated. I mean, when you go into classrooms and where students can hear that, and also when they can tell you what are the features of that language. So for instance, there are certain schools where, for instance, Dr. Rocky Holly has worked, where students can say that the way the past tense is marked in African American language is such and such. It's not that people just forgot to put the ED on, but when you're in a context that as the people were in at the time, anything where the existing, context would tell you that the thing is past, you didn't need to put the ED end in. And students can say it is marked, and they use the linguistic words, the linguistic, conversation, saying it is marked in such and such a way, possessives are marked in such a way. That's in some schools, but there's still many where people are told that's bad English. So there's that. And in addition to the things that need to be done, I mean, everything that Black Lives Matter raises still is important. And in some way, in terms of just the perception of African American students, particularly male students, as troublemakers, as given to, difficulty, over suspended, or the research shows that, and the connection between discipline of African American students, particularly boys, and the prison pipeline. Those are things we are still working on. The absence of African American teachers and leaders. I said to the room, look around you. There's a lot that's good here, but look who is not here. I just said that, and people looked, and they could see, and I didn't have to say any more. And then I talked about a principal asking me to work with her on the anti-Black racism in a bilingual school. And that is both heartening in that she named it, and we are proceeding to work on it. And I also said that in schools that are bilingual, people are resistant to facing the idea that racism exists, because on a whole, by and large, it's a progressive movement, and one would think that we would not have, that kind of concern. So things are in process, but there's so much more to be done. And one of the things I said today is that it is important not to despair about it, because racism is systemic and it's alive. You have to keep paying attention to it every year. You can't say we've ticked it off, like a checklist. We have done anti-racism, we have done equity. I said a school that tells me it has done equity and anti-racism, I would say they have no idea what they're talking about, because it is work that has to be ongoing. It's work that has historical roots. It's work that serves a certain interest. And so we have to keep working on it, naming it, dismantling it, and working on it again every year with every group of students, with every group of teachers, with every group of parents, and so forth. So yes, there's a lot that needs to be done. And I would say that since the George Floyd murder, that more has come to light, in terms of what is an issue here. It's not just Black History Month. That's enough. We've got to go deeper. When you look at what is happening with African American AP courses and so forth, and the College Board, in my view, caving in to the governor of Florida and interests that those are serious matters. And one would think that you mightn't expect that, but we have to expect it, because in some ways, every time we make gains, we can expect retrenchment. And I feel very strongly that people do not get worried if something is ineffective. So I consider that attacks on our work indicate that we are doing well. And I encourage people to take that view, because if it was irrelevant, people would leave us alone. So there's that. I talked about the fact that taking back the standards is important, in that one subversive and I would say successful way that we can work is to look at what it is that we're supposed to be teaching in any subject. You know, whether it's a process, is it something with compare and contrast, is it showing cause and effect? Just take those things that are in standards but are also part of life. Because one of the things I claim that there would be no standards. The standards come from lived experience. And we forget that the standards don't belong to the people at the district office or anything like that. They're ours. And what we have to do is take hold of them and infuse them with content that brings the truth out, that puts things into history, that helps us to see how it's relevant to students' lives. And to be clear that it's a successful approach, so that when an administrator or anybody comes and says, well, what exactly are you doing? Why are you covering this material? You can seriously say, I am teaching a process or a skill or a concept that is mandated in our work. Is what I call making the mandated meaningful. And when you add the fact that you can say the majority of students in this class know how to do it, and the reason why they know what it is because I've connected it to their lives. And it is hard to match, but we must be thorough and keep data, and to be able to show that the students know what is being done and they understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, and also capturing their voices in terms of the sense of empowerment that they feel when they have in fact learned something. And I've argued that, you know, we only hear of students who may be protesting, but we need to gather the voices of students who are saying, but I never knew that, or how come we're only now hearing that, or what else is there to know? Because students do that from all backgrounds, and we need to capture that. You know, it doesn't mean that because we do that, all will be well, but it's a step that we can take. You know, it's part of our discretionary power.
Sure.
You know, that you are doing what you're supposed to be doing. And then, of course, there's the larger question of organizing, of working with people across identities and interests and organizations, to be able to say, yes, that's something that concerns both of us. I followed the presentation by the presentation on on amplifying the voice of LGBTQ students. And I went because I was interested, but also when I saw the number of people in that room, I said to myself, it is clear that CABE is doing something that needs to be done. I mean, there was standing room only.
Wow.
And it was a powerful presentation. Everything that was said, I just thoroughly supported it. And I went to the presenter afterwards and I said to him, it is hard to follow you. I feel like going home and having a rest. And he said, I should not. I should keep going. And when I started, I said to the people, because many people, there were several hundred people in that room. And I said to them, everything you heard the speaker before saying about structural, systemic discrimination and oppression, which is the word he used, apply that to race, and we will look at where they intersect. And we did that as much as we could given the situation.
Sure.
So it was a very productive day. You know, I wish that we could have had a day in each of those. We didn't even have to try and fit it into an hour and a half. But I learned a lot just listening to the presenter before, how he had gone around it. And because it was time for stories, I was able to tell some of my own, you know, talking about the whole significance of having your language validated, and how speaking makes it possible for you to express your humanity, and the kind of home I grew up in where that was encouraged, to the point where my mother decided it really, the amount of time I talked, she just said, we have to sign you up in the debating society, and which she did. And then she also cautioned me that when I took this thing to heart, she said, well, who do you think you are that you cannot be contradicted? Because I really took language and continue to take language as some place where it's a power I can hold forth, I can question, I can reshape life because of that. And I want that for every child. Sometimes people ask me why I do the work I do around race, if it's because I've had a particularly bad time. I've experienced racism like other people, but I would say that given what some other people have experienced, I would say what is minor because of class differences and geography. I grew up on a very small island, 4 by 8 square miles. I mean, you can't get much smaller than that. Both of my parents were teachers. I grew up in the middle of the century, born in 1950. I was a middle child, and I had a good supportive community. And why I do this work in schools, I want that for every child to the degree that we can create it through the systems, because I am convinced that their parents don't love them any less than mine did. And so I am just there to make sure that the things I got that have made me feel life is worthwhile and being able to do the things I want to, that's why I do it. I don't do it out of petulance or grief. I do it out of a desire for the joy that they should have what I have in my life. So, that's why I do this work. That's why I deal with race, because I have a good cushion to work with what comes at me. My mother used to say to us, when people criticize you or say whatever, they're just jealous. You just keep going, and I really am very upset when I go to schools and I see children, particularly black boys or girls or whatever ways they're presenting themselves, in distress. They always, something is wrong. They're doing something wrong. And so I start the conversation. Let's see what they can do, what they do right, and then work from there, because the hidden assets are serious. I have domains that influence my work. Hand of history, so try to understand the historical forces that have shaped the conditions we're in now, both the nature of the racism and the resistance to racism, because I think both are important. So for instance, when people send me WhatsApp messages, about some racism with the police or with schools or with housing, I always let me see what has happened since that WhatsApp message went out. And actually I have friends who do that now. So sometimes, because of the social media, things go quickly,
Sure.
And so I would say, well, since that happened, 8,000 people have objected to it, or such and such, and we never hear that. And we have to keep documenting the response, the resistance, because when you're denied that, you just don't think there's any point in doing anything,
right.
So there's that. So that's the hand of history that I follow and hold and try to use to reshape the life that we're living on today. And then the community wealth, which comes out of the work of Yasso, those hidden things that one have got pressed down, denied, deformed because of colonialism or various forms of oppression. I said to people today, sometimes in education we behave like Columbus, as if nothing was there when we arrived, as he said of this land, that the parents had nothing, the students had nothing until we arrived, and we must stop being Columbus. Our job is to uncover what is there and use it to build the strong communities that we have. Even something like asking parents when they come to parent night, or when we go to them, of what did you learn from your parents or your family? And you could include everybody before you came to school. And it doesn't matter what level of formal education they have or have not had, you get an answer. And I'm saying just something as small as that shifts the balance of power. And it also says, I believe that what you have to say is important. And if you tell me what it is I can work with it. And we're trying to discourage people to say the children are not prepared for school. I say we have to change that. The school is not prepared for the children who are coming to us. And we have to do what needs to be done to prepare them. So they would say, I've done some of the schools I've worked in, they say, well, the students who are from English-speaking homes are doing better on the literacy test than even the Spanish-speaking students, even though the reading is in Spanish, because the families don't read with them. So the question is, well, what do they do with them? And sometimes they admit that they are great storytellers. And I say, well, if you do not know how to use this storytelling to link to literacy, then you're going to learn how to do it. because it can be done. It's just another form of the language.
Sure.
And if there's no rubric for it, then we can work on one. So this is the kind of thing that makes me want to be connected with CABE, because it's anyway. And I know I keep going on and on, but
you have just such wonderful stories. As we bring this interview to a close, I wonder if you have any final closing thoughts.
Yes. Anti-racist work from an intersectional lens is very important to me. I think it's crucial to developing the kind of critical literacy and critical consciousness that is needed, not just to make your way in the world, but to remake the world into a more just and generous place. And that every generation of teachers, students, filmmakers like you, it's our job to do it. And there is no giving up about it, and there's no end to it. And if it ends, it means that we have lost the vision of what it means to create a world where each of us can live to our full humanity. So
yes,
that's what I am thinking.
We're all fighters coming together.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing some thoughts and spending some time with us today to make this film.